Welcome to the kickoff of the University of Washington's Encyclopedia of Puget Sound. My name is Joel Baker. I'm the director of the UW's Puget Sound Institute, and I'm a faculty member at the University of Washington in Tacoma in Environmental Sciences. And I'm going to get things started today. We have a really interesting program for you. I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about why we're here, what the encyclopedia is all about, and then I'll turn it over to a panel discussion, and then most importantly at 4 o'clock. He's restoring the audio here. So this is all about using new technologies to communicate. Why maybe this is not such a great idea when you go back to paper and pencil. At any rate, I don't think I can deal with that. So let me, I'll be on the way. Thank you. So let me just say a few words and make some introductions, and then we'll get kicked off here. So at 5 o'clock there's a reception immediately following. You'll perhaps notice we have beer and wine sitting there. I usually stay on until 5. So just a few words about why we're here and what we do. The Puget Sound Institute is about 2 years old. It's a research center here at UW, and it was really created as a partnership between the United States Environmental Protection Agency at the federal level, the Puget Sound Partnership at the state level, and the university, to really systematically address this age-old problem of how do you get the information out of the academy into the resource management agencies. This is something that we've struggled with and likely will continue to struggle with forever, but the Institute is really designed to help all of us at the university and indeed at research institutions around the region and indeed around the world to bring that information to bear on the really tricky problems of restoring and protecting the Puget Sound ecosystem. So that's what we're all about. The Puget Sound Institute is designed to not only conduct research, but probably more importantly to coordinate the research of others and to disseminate that information. And that's what we're here to do today, to talk about the product of that, the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound. So this really started with a conversation that Mary Ruckelshaus and I and a few others had several years ago, where we were all helping the Puget Sound Partnership, and we were kind of staring down the barrel of a gun of creating another very thick phone book size technical synthesis report that was going to take several years to do. It was going to take a lot of money, and we knew it was going to land with a thud, and no one was ever going to read it. And we said there must be a better way. We think the encyclopedia is a better way, and we think that this is a new way of creating this kind of synthetic activity that lives, that engages a large community, and is actually used by policymakers. So I give a lot of credit to Mary Ruckelshaus for getting us started on this road. I also want to acknowledge a few people. Jeff Rice, who is here, is the managing editor of Puget Sound. Maybe the idea was Mary and I sitting around having a beer, but the implementation of this really rests with Jeff Rice. He's done a phenomenal job pulling this together, and the credit goes to him. Chris Seimer, who is here running around, is the web architect of the encyclopedia, is responsible for all the back-end work that's been done. We've had a number of students and others help us. They're listed here, and I want to acknowledge in particular the web development team at UW Creative Commons, a really talented group of web developers who helped us pull together the encyclopedia. Lots of collaborators outside the university, of course. The funding comes from EPA, as I mentioned, and Ben Cope and Chris Castor and Dan Steinmore have helped us launch this thing along the way and have been quite supportive. I think Ben is here, brought us on earlier today. The Puget Sound Partnership, of course, Ken Kearns, who was the science director at the time, Tracy Collier, who is here, is the current science director, and Scott Redmond. And this really started by adapting some work that had been done previously by UW scientists and others from federal agencies and state agencies in something called the Puget Sound Science Review. So we really built the encyclopedia on the good fundamental work that was done by a large group of authors, again led by Mary Ruckelshaus as the lead editor of that. We also collaborate with NOAA in our mapping products that are embedded in the encyclopedia through the Office of Response and Restoration. Amy Burton and Ben Shore, and Ben is here representing them today. And then a number of other colleagues, and you're going to hear from them some of them in a moment. I want to particularly acknowledge the support of the college environment, who was instrumental in getting the Puget Sound Institute established in the first place. Partnerships with the Encyclopedia of Life and the Encyclopedia of Earth. And when I say partnerships, meaning we stole a lot of their ideas. We call them and we ask them for advice, and in fact we invited a couple of them out today to help us launch our editorial board. We've also very recently formed informal partnerships at this stage with Carnegie Harbor Labs and Seattle Online. And we also link to things like NatureServe to pull in content. So lots of a lot of collaborators here. The other thing I want to do today is to announce our editorial board. The role of the editorial board is to be the sort of the senior advisors to the encyclopedia and help bring content to us and help us as this enterprise move forward. And in actually alphabetical order, my first name, if you're trying to figure out the order of these. Amy Snover from Climate Impacts Group. Obviously, we'll cover issues related to climate change impacts on Puget Sound. Cy Simonstead from School of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences will cover all things that swim in the water. He claims this is too broad, but fish and nearshore habitats. Joe Gatos from the Sea Dock Society is taking on birds and mammals. He also says this is too broad. He needs help, but he's starting out doing birds and mammals for us. This guy knows something about water quality, and we'll cover the water quality aspects for the encyclopedia. Mary has agreed to step in from the Natural Capital Project and help us with ecosystem-based management issues in the encyclopedia. Nate, also from Climate Impacts Group, will help on the climate change work. Patrick Christie from the School of Marine and Environmental Affairs will oversee the economic and social science aspects of Puget Sound Encyclopedia. And Parker McCready, who I saw here earlier, from the UW School of Oceanography, will handle all things physical. And then Tim Quinn, who's the chief scientist for habitats, upland habitats for Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, will cover all things upland. So you can imagine these people have fairly broad portfolios to start, but the idea is this is a core group, and they're going to reach out to their colleagues, and hopefully we'll reach out to many people in this room for assistance. So my message to you is that we want this to be a collaborative exercise of all of us that are engaged in Puget Sound research, graduate students, undergraduates, faculty, staff of state, federal, local agencies. We intend this to be a big tent. In fact, it has to be a big tent or it's not going to work. We need you to contribute to us, and we need for us to help you do your jobs in synthesizing and integrating Puget Sound information in order for this to be successful. So that's my introductory comments. I'd like to now introduce Dean Lisa Gromlich, the Dean of the College of the Environment, who will lead our panel. Please.
And to Jeff and Chris, they're back there making things happen. When I got here 2 years ago as the Dean of the College of the Environment, I was told in the first couple of weeks about the Puget Sound Institute, and it was an idea then, and a newly funded idea, and you have taken that idea and given it form, and we're here to celebrate that today. And Joel, you were very inviting about please join us, and I would actually like to invite the panelists as well as the audience to not just join in as patting everybody on the back and saying good job and it's really beautiful and isn't this great, we have an encyclopedia, but I think this is a new way of doing science, and this is something that we need to really sort of kick the tires of and ask hard questions and figure out how we're really going to have this be something besides at this, what's a very beautiful compendium of information, but something that actually moves us from science towards solutions. So I urge you, as when we have time for audience questions, to feel free not to just ask the nice questions, to really take this seriously and talk about how we can really fully use this tool. So with that, I'd like to invite our panelists to come join me up here. So we've got Michael Pidworny, who is a board member of the Encyclopedia of Earth and associate professor of physical geography at the University of British Columbia. Michael's research interests include climate change and use of technology in education and the impact of land use change and biodiversity. In fact, panelists, will you just start taking chairs up there? Okay, Michael. Tracy, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. The Encyclopedia of Life is an online portal that began in 2007 with the goal of providing a web page nearly for every species on Earth. Okay. Tracy has worked for the Boston Public School System, the Student Conservation Association of America. Rob, okay, is at Microsoft Research, and there he works on applications of technology to information challenges in environmental science. He's a real scientist. His career has included research on glacier dynamics and seismically driven surface deformation based on data from the synthetic aperture radar satellites. When he's at Microsoft, he works to release research tools for adoption and use by both the academic and the operational geoscience community. And finally, Jen Davison is a research scientist in the College of the Environment at UW, where she works to accelerate the communication of science both within the college and from the college to its surrounding communities. She's also a co-organizer of Science Online Seattle. So welcome to our panelists. And I'd like to start by exploring a little bit about the background and sort of inspiration that we've had for the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound. And to start with Michael and Tracy both. You both have thought about many of the questions that we're going to address tonight on national and international scales in your roles with the Encyclopedia of Earth and the Encyclopedia of Life. Could you just take a minute or two to explain, Michael, if you want to start, what your role and how the Encyclopedia of Earth and Life has evolved?
Well, I could talk about the Encyclopedia of Earth. I'm a board member of this encyclopedia, and it began in 2006 as an idea of Cutler Cleveland, a professor at Boston University. He was able to get some funding, and we started this idea. And the idea was basically to use the internet to provide a source of information about the Earth and the Earth's environment that could be accessed by all, by the public, and teachers and students and instructors and professors. Over the 6 years that I've been involved with it, we went from several hundred articles to 7,500 articles. We have about 900 people writing articles for us, about 190 topic editors. So my role has been writing articles, being a topic editor, and more importantly, sort of steering the development and direction of the encyclopedia. And today we had an interesting sort of discussion about the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound, and I found it interesting that probably the most important thing that was discussed was who's going to access this information, who's it for, and I think we realize that this is for scientists and which is different than the role that the Encyclopedia of Earth has. The Encyclopedia of Earth is basically geared for anyone to read. So it's interesting.
Thank you. Tracy, do you want to tell us about Encyclopedia of Life?
The Encyclopedia of Life is a global effort to bring together information about all life on Earth and put it all into the context of a species page, one for every species. And so I can just say it's a work in progress. Everything on the Encyclopedia of Life is under Creative Commons licenses or public domain, and the hope is that it is going to be reused and repurposed. Our proof of concept was just basically the aggregation. Can we create these partnerships and collaborative relationships to have people share content? And we really kind of went on a good faith effort that this information is important. It needs to be freely accessible. People who can't get to the dusty archives of the Harvard Natural History Museum or the library should be able to see a type specimen and also see biological primary literature online. And so that's sort of been our goal. In terms of how it's evolved, in 2007, E.O. Wilson had his wish, and that was to have a webpage for every species. And now we're working on that every day. The goal is to serve authoritative information, but also to serve information from the general public. We have a strong citizen science component in terms of contributions, especially photos and videos and sounds. We started out with about 20 content partners. Fishbase was our first content partner, and funnily enough, it kind of looked like we were an encyclopedia of fish when we first started, but now we have over 200 trusted content partners, individual scientists, graduate students, undergrads, and fellows. We developed a curatorial network, and everything I'm talking about is still very much a work in progress, and we're learning quite a bit from these conversations that we're having. But we're moving towards trying to make things accessible to everyone, so it's kind of a tall order, so we're still working that out.
Thank you. So, Mary, if I could turn to you for a moment. Michael said, you made the comment that who is it for, and it's for scientists. And I think this clearly rose out of the work that you and others were doing with the Puget Sound Partnership. And can you give us, once again, somewhat briefly, a little background on why this type of effort was needed and some of the work that has gone on to actually synthesize the science of Puget Sound?
Sure. Yeah, so I think Joel gave a really good thumbnail of this. It was over some beer conversations and others. And in my view, back then when this started, this was probably 5 more years ago, I was feeling a real push and pull. So a push for this kind of synthesis and science information about Puget Sound from the academic community, and especially younger scientists, which I see some of in here, but not enough. Because I think the younger scientists understand the value of this other medium, which is not print, which is web-based information, and the really desire, the push to get out their information in a timely fashion. So that was the push that we noticed. And the pull in this case, and I think this gets to the audience question as well, was from the Puget Sound Partnership Leadership Council and their boards. And that's really, I think, an important audience for this is the idea that that community of decision makers trying to decide what should we do to restore or protect Puget Sound wanted to know where can I go, where can be a one-stop shop for understanding the scientific consensus about what do we know about Puget Sound in all these many facets of the people and nature part of the system. So I think that poll, the policy draw, and they wanted some site they could go to, some place where they could say, can you guys just agree on some scientific information that we could then use as the basis of our decision. So it was really those dual purposes that we first led into this Puget Sound Science Update that we modeled after the IPCC reports, where you had an outline identified by the decision makers who would end up using the information. So the general broad brush of the content was identified by the partnership leadership group. And then really great author teams were competitively chosen. So a lot of professors from the University of Washington, scientists from agencies and NGOs, put together information that was peer-reviewed, and that was meant to be the scientific consensus around particular issues as defined by the leaders, the policy leaders, who would then use it to make informed decisions. So that was the germ of the update, which, if you've looked at it, it's incomplete. It's a start. The outlines were long, and not all the content is in there yet. But the idea was, and this is one of the beer inspirations, was to make this, in Joel's view, it was always to make it live and electronic and quickly updatable, so that that people who wanted to get the latest information on DO and Hood Canal could go there and find out what's in the peer-reviewed consensus view of the scientific community around this issue. So I hope there'll be great incentive for people to populate this, as Joel and Lisa have talked about, because if you know there are people out there who are going to use this information and they want it to be rigorously reviewed, then that hopefully will be a good incentive.
Right, that's a great summary. And part of what then is part of the design, so we have scientists, sort of doing the push and the decision makers doing the pull, but what's different from the IPCC reports is it's not huge volumes, it's a web-based medium, and that is why the panel also consists of both Rob from Microsoft Research and Jen, who works with Science Online Seattle and open science issues. So if we can start with Rob to sort of explore this opportunities in web-based medium, there's a huge amount of research that goes on in the Puget Sound State Literacy ecosystem. And I've heard that the restoration efforts in Puget Sounds have been referred to as, quote, 1,000 random acts of science. And so how can technology help us overcome the balkanization of information resources and help us understand the Puget Sound ecosystem, not in these sort of really granular ways, but in ways in which we can actually create more integrative synthesis and in the end, actionable kinds of information. How does the work that you do at Microsoft help us think about that?
Let's see, well, it's obviously a really broad topic. Let me start with an example. The group that I'm in at Microsoft Research focuses on collaboration with academics with people outside of Microsoft. And so I happen to be introduced to a woman named Carol McElroy, who's the Skagit Climate Consortium. And she's trying to pull together papers that are written by scientists who are working in the Skagit watershed, all the way up from the very top of the Cascades, all the way down into the video rents. And so we kind of took her work as an inspiration to get involved in that kind of thinking, in part because it goes beyond the science and the academic and into the question of how does the public perceive the kind of scientific research that's going on. And so I had an intern who started reading papers, and she just chewed through like 50 or 60 papers, and she decided to write a game that would allow you to become a manager for the Skagit watershed. And so she did that. She sat down and she learned the programming language, and she wrote this game, and she used a visualization engine that we are providing as a research tool to sort of tell stories periodically, like you have a cutscene in a game. And the idea of the game is that you're managing the dams up in the upper Skagit, and then as you make money from your hydropower, you can invest that in infrastructure to try and deal with the fact that the SIG right here at UW will tell you that the snow line is going up. And if the snow line is going up and the winter storms come in, that water can no longer be stopped by the snowpack. Instead, it's going to flush down. So the century flood is now going to become a 30-year flood or something like that. And so my intern's conclusion was that no matter what you do, if this climate trend continues, right, then you're going to be faced with this sort of flooding situation. And so to sort of back that up, she went and did the research and wrote the game. And so if the question is, how can technology help? Well, now if we can successfully push that game out to where people can play it, there's an opportunity to get engaged in the science without having to go and read 50 papers. But instead, you're sort of playing the game turn by turn, spending money and so forth, and then you find out what the consequences are when things are like this. So that's kind of a tactical example, but I have some other notes that I'm going to keep on sort of rambling in this way. The short answer for how you can sort of make progress with technology is that there's two parts to it in my view. The first part is sociology, and the second part is metadata, which is not a very interesting word. But the sociology part, we think about this a lot. We think about incentivizing people to use technology. For example, one of the big, huge flags is, do you publish your data? NSF is trying to incentivize that through these data management plan requirements. If you're going to get NSF money, you have to have a DMP. And so what we built was a tool that allows you to publish a data set up to the Data One repository from Excel. So we're trying to make that easy. So the first part of incentivizing participation in technology is to make it easy to do. And then the second part is to provide a reward, which has to happen in a sociological way. For example, if you get tenure by providing data out there that other people use, and that data gets cited, rather than having to publish and hold on to your data so nobody else can use it, that's kind of a switch or flip in the paradigm of how you sort of do science. Right? And so that sort of leads into this sort of how do you flip over the paradigm and incentivize things? How can you get a PhD or a tenure through contributing to a bigger data pool? And that in turn sort of implies who's this for? Who's the encyclopedia for? In a sense, it might be for a scientist who hasn't been invented yet. Somebody who doesn't think about, I'm going to go generate my own data, and then I'm going to carry it through and publish a paper. And I'm going to go generate some more data and publish a paper, and that data is going to vanish into the ether. Instead, you can become a scientist who says, I'm going to go out onto the web and find some data, and I'm going to understand that data because it's going to be so well managed that I can use it. I'm going to write papers from that. So I can sort of cut myself loose from the data acquisition part, which gets over into the technology piece. The cloud, people talk about cloud infrastructure, and it's a great thing, but there's more to research than just using the cloud and sort of cut it there. But basically, standards and services, the way of talking between computers, is a really great way of getting beyond the, I'm going to build another data portal. So there's lots and lots of data portals out there, but you always have to interact with them as a human being, whereas if you can manage to make your system talk in terms of services, then suddenly you open up this sort of unanticipated use of what data you provide. And that's, I'll stop there because I've been here a long time, but that's a starting point.
It's a great starting point. That was a very rich set of comments there. And I think it perfectly sets up Jen, who is someone that thinks a lot about crowdsourcing, social media, and in particular open science. And Jen, do you want to comment a bit about how the technology is adding value and some advantages and disadvantages you might see for the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound engaging in open science? What's the opportunity here?
Yeah, thanks. First, I'd like to kind of give you a contextual definition of open science, because it's kind of a broad statement and vague a little bit. But from my understanding of open science, so it's really based on three drivers, which is the fact that the issues that we're dealing with now are wicked problems. There's no one lab, one discipline, one perspective that can solve things like Puget Sound restoration. And then we have this amazing opportunity with technology, with the internet and social media, to redefine the way that science actually is done. We can take a different approach, a more collaborative, more inclusive approach to scientific research. And then I believe a third driver in this kind of open science trend is the fact that scientists are now called upon more now than ever to explain why their research is important. So these three drivers are what's behind what's called open science, which is really the opening up of the whole process of the scientific research continuum, from asking questions. What kind of questions do we ask? How do we ask them? What kind of data do we gather? How do we gather that data? How do we analyze it? And how do we then take those data and synthesize them and create results and then interpret those results and apply them? All of these things can now be much more collaboratively engaged in, and this is what open science is. So we're talking about citizen science, we're talking about open data archives that you can then access and create brand new knowledge from all this existing data that hasn't been figured out before. We can also talk about crowdfunding and even interdisciplinarity that really just allows us to ask more pointed questions that can get at the wicked problems that we're dealing with. So I think that technology is absolutely critical to this open science movement, and this whole idea is advantageous to the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound. We're dealing with the wicked problem, we're dealing with the restoration of Puget Sound, and well, first directly, you can think about all of the open access research that's coming online. The Encyclopedia of Puget Sound will have access to this research, you can share it, and then you can, again, meta-analyze it for new insights. But really, it's really more about taking a new look at the way we do science and aligning it to the problems that we're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jen. So, a question that I think is the open question then, and is relevant, I think, to the people that are in this room, which is, how do we actually incentivize people to participate? Mary, can I start with you, which is, you're busy. What are the advantages of a working scientist, perhaps not the scientist that hasn't been invented yet, that Rob has, we need to talk about that, Rob, I want to invent that scientist, but what incentivizes a busy scientist in getting involved in an effort like the Encyclopedia of Puget?
So yeah, I think that is a really good question. I think one, for those people, and I know there are a lot of the next generation coming up who really feel this way, a lot of scientists, myself included, we really want to do good, high-quality science and have it be relevant to some social problem and be used. So not just write a peer-reviewed publication and get that checked off in whatever promotion path we're on, but that it actually informs social problems. So that's one incentive that I feel personally, and I know a lot of the younger generation scientists coming in, a lot of the people in my lab and who work with me are really driven by that, and that's inspiring to see. So that's one thing. And the second one is the timeliness of communication. So there is, as you know, there's a big time lag in getting peer-reviewed publications out. And so if we can get good peer-reviewed scientific information into the public sphere faster this way, with all of the dangers and red flags that go up with a peer-reviewed process that's this quick or open, then I think it also, the lags that are built into our system right now, which are incredibly frustrating for a lot of us, would be broken down. So I think for me those are two, it's the relevance and the timeliness. That's why I participate.
Yeah. Do one or two of the other panelists want to comment on that, about incentives and overcoming the obstacles?
I can comment, I'd like to comment from an academic perspective as well, that the incentivization for scientists to engage in these things, I think in part has to come from the top down, in that you need to be able to create space for scientists to do these things as part of their career track. And like Rob said, it needs to be easy and it needs to be rewarding.
Okay, so now, Joel didn't really tell me I could do this, but I have a bunch of questions here that I am curious about, but I'm guessing that I'm not the only person in the room that has questions. And we have these mics down here. So you have 26 minutes before the bar opens. And would anybody like to come down and ask this panel some questions? Okay, Jeff, you're going to be, yes, okay, here we go. And could you identify who you are?
My name is Dr. Dale Calkin, and I represent Blue Creek in the northern section of Seattle in Carkey Park. I'm president of CCAP, and we're involved in fish restoration in that park. And just the other day, we had an issue of water quality. Seattle City came and looked at our water, and our water quality is so poor, it's like being a little bit pregnant. All right? It's poor. And the thing is that I would like to know what in the future will this organization do to increase the water quality. For example, we have a huge E. coliform in the creek and a lot of other things. And I know pretty darn well that there's probably a lot of contamination of minerals and things of this nature. So that was my basic question.
And you know what, it's wonderful to have a citizen here and a citizen that is as knowledgeable as you. I want to sort of open that up to the panel and or Joel if you want to take comment on that. Okay. We actually have a water quality guide.
That raises a really good point. I mean, one of the things that I learned the hard way several times is that nobody knows more about the environment than people who live in it. And if this system, if it's crowdsourcing, whatever you call it, if we can use the technology to tap into local expertise, the people who live on the streams, people who observe it every day, from residents in neighborhoods to the tribes to anyone, we do a really lousy job of pulling that information together and digesting it. We get a lot of one-off anecdotal stories, and we kind of file them away, and frankly, doesn't much with them. If we could build systems that integrated that information, so it's available to us for the meta-analysis, that would be fantastic.
And I say one other thing.
Just shout it out.
Our creek is the most prolific creek as far as NOAA and all these other organizations. There's tremendous data that we have that's been stored over 20 or 30 years on that very issue.
So it's making that available.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Nobody's
it's
come
the issue.
by.
Okay. Thanks the point.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Harrell. I'm an anthropologist, and I've heard some really interesting anthropology from everybody on the panel about how the culture of science and the sociology of science, as Rob called it, have influenced the way that this encyclopedia is put together. And the simple question I'd like to ask is two parts, but simple. One is, how much of this sociology of science is in the encyclopedia itself? How much does the encyclopedia tell us about what you guys have all very interestingly said today? And then how much other science of, say, economics, anthropology, tribal history, and so forth is included in the encyclopedia?
Can I respond to that as the editor for the?
That would be
there we
great.
go. Hi, Steve. Hi. So that's to be determined, and I lay it an invitation at your feet to say, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what would be useful. So what would be useful for the encyclopedia? I think a lot of this is yet to be determined. We just had the first editorial meeting today. So really the sky's the limit perhaps. I think there's issues about what information could be brought to bear. I think there's a dearth of information and sources of information about the human dimensions or social sciences of Puget Sound, but there's a growing group of individuals who are conducting that science that could be brought to bear. I think the question you bring up about the sociology of science and the practice of science would also be an interesting, because we typically think about the lens of analysis being the people, the public, the tribes, the fishermen, and the Puget Sound. We don't typically think of the subject of analysis being the scientists themselves. And yet this is exactly what much of what social science is about, is what science is being done, why is that particular science being done, how does it influence policy or not. And so I think there's a wealth of ideas and opportunities there to offer to the encyclopedia.
And you know what, are there other members of the editorial board in the audience that could raise their hands? We've got Patrick. Okay, there's Parker back there. Amy's here. And so once again, we've got the panelists, we've got Joe, we've got Jeff, we've got Chris. So, you know, we really do have a wealth of people that are going to leave this room with the ideas that you collectively have as part of their marching orders. So don't be shy.
So could I just add to what Patrick just mentioned?
And can you identify yourself?
Oh, yeah. I'm Usha Varanasi, and I am a scientist at large with some experience on Puget Sound. What I wanted to say is that the sociology and anthropology for Puget Sound is a very interesting question, because we have done this with different decades. We do things with Puget Sound, right? And from large documents and reports that just go into somebody's bookcase, slowly we are coming to using the technology and trying to do things as they are happening. So we have, one way we have made progress from decades to decades in terms of getting the science in front of people, even the scientists, right away, which has not happened, like as the dean said about 1,000 or random acts of science, and that quite often we don't know. The other part of it that we really need to do in developing this encyclopedia is the storytelling, because we do this every 10 years or every 15 years, and there are some of us who've been here for 40 years kind of remember all the story. there are things that we learn as we moved along, and that is to me is anthropology, a part of it, as what worked and what didn't work, and some analysis of it, and it just becomes more anecdotal rather than certain type of analysis, which I think the sociologists, not only the sociology of what happens to fish versus people, do we like Puget Sound, do we feel it's making us healthy, is it good for our children, that part of it, but also what the community of scientists have been doing over all these years, and what can we learn from that. Would be an interesting aspect of this encyclopedia, because it's not a voluminous book, but a continuously living history.
And
Is that okay?
Usha, very interesting comment from the scientist at large, if you like that. Any specific comments that the panel has about the, yes?
I have one comment that's related to the last two people that discussed their issues. It's really important to recognize that this is a seed that is planted. And while the board believes they know the direction that this is going to grow in, like the Encyclopedia of Earth did not grow the way that the board members thought it would. And a lot of our sort of development was steered by people outside the board, people that contacted board members as offers to articles, and so I would recommend to this audience that if you have an idea, if you think there's something that this encyclopedia should deal with, contact the managing editor and the board members.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
I would second that. At the Encyclopedia of Life, we, throughout the 5 years that we've been in existence, people are using it in ways that we didn't expect. And it's really helpful when they tell us how they're using it so that we can help tailor it towards their needs.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar comment. One thing that Joel and I have talked about from the beginning, and the co-authors of the initial sort of seed content, was we really hope that graduate students, faculty members running grad courses, anybody in this region who's interested in a topic and is motivated to write about it, like this history would be fascinating to do, is to come forward, and we need people to bring in those ideas and write the content, and then, as you say, that will guide the direction that it goes, which is sort of the real bottom-up beauty of this, I think. So I don't know how many of you in here think you could run a course, and as their students' term papers could turn into something like this, or something where you're already getting your students, or you are a grad student and you have a thesis chapter that you think you could turn into this, or get a friend who's a good writer to turn your wonky thesis chapter into something. And just things where we could get, multiple benefits out of things that we're writing anyway, or synthesizing. It would just be a wonderful way to populate it.
I was going to just add one more thing about this whole discussion gets back to the idea of incentivizing people to work, and create content for the encyclopedia. And at some point, I'd be interested in getting to the idea of how important is the interface, and finding new ways of contributing information. I was interested in what Rob said about the games and the creative ways of presenting information. Is that one way to incentivize people to create an interface that really draws them in new ways?
Yeah, I think that the sort of the field of dreams problem is recurring also in the technology side of things. If I build this, will people be using it, right? And how do you make something that's not only attractive and sort of like when you hit the website, but also sort of engages you so that you come back and back to it. Obviously, a game would be one idea, but another thing is just to sort of anticipate that people are going to come to something with a limited amount of time and a busy day, so you want to make it as easy as possible. And that's something in my job I struggle with a lot. So I think it's the kind of thing you can't skip on. You have to really do that. And Wikipedia would be a great example of something that was sort of booted itself up, and it just sort of managed to be something really engaging in that way. I think partially because it wasn't too tough to learn how to write content, and then it was easy to link your content to 17 other different articles. And so that just one facet of the human-computer interaction, if you like, is, it was a great win for an example of those sort of successes.
I just have a question and kind of comment about this, what you're talking about with design. I think it's interesting to think about if the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound is going to be used not only for as a compendium, but also for creating solutions, because the design will, an interactive design that allows for this iterative, not just Wikipedia kind of editing, but also this more of a collaborative environment. Might be really exciting and also a reason for someone to come back if they feel like they actually get to be involved in creating new knowledge, creating new solutions in the encyclopedia itself. Is that something that you're thinking about?
And probably thinking a lot more things at the end of this.
Yeah.
So, how about a question, Nancy?
Yeah, hi, my name's Jerry Joyce, and I'm involved in citizen science programs at Seattle. But I also chair the Birds and Mammal Work Group for the Puget Sound Ecosystem Monitoring Program. And working in that group, we know that birds have wings, and whales have tails, and ecosystems don't need no political boundaries. So I'm just curious why this isn't the Encyclopedia of the Sailor Sea.
That's me. So we recognize that the Puget Sound is an arbitrary border, and that the animals don't know that, and neither does the water. We were asked a couple of months ago whether we would consider changing the name of or a product to the Encyclopedia of Sailor Sea, and I just didn't have the heart to go back and tell Jeff that he had to redo all of his branding and all of his logos, and so we do in fact consider all of the Sailor Sea in this. We've had conversations with our Canadian colleagues on bringing some of their content in, so although the name of it is not going to change, the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound, the scope of it is the entire geographic scope of the Sailor Sea.
So, hi, my name's Paul Williams. I work with the Suquamish tribe. I'm a biologist, and my question is, what about adding failure to the list of data that you could put into the database? There's a lot of scientists who feel they perhaps their careers wouldn't go very far if they actually published their failures. And I tried a little bit of research. It's very tough. I made a lot of mistakes and a lot of failures, but I learned a lot. So I think that would be a rich source of data.
So we don't reinvent, we don't make the same mistakes.
Okay. Here in the burgundy sweater.
I was just curious if we might put some science that's in action, that's actually happening, that maybe hasn't been peer-reviewed yet, but could be edited by someone, so that if you're thinking about doing a project, you can see kind of what's happening already, and maybe I should partner with this person instead of starting my own project. And along those same lines, maybe information about long-term monitoring programs, and the data that's already been out there in certain areas for many years, that you could follow up on or be a part of.
Once again with the panel, yeah, do you know of examples like this? Or
I know that there are efforts to publish negative results or failures. I also know there are efforts to publish or to put online grant proposals, whether they were funded or not, which is another great space to explore like what's being done and what are great potential collaborators.
Actually, it's Hiro Kanasai from Oceanography, and I have quite a few of you. Some of you have met Fresh last in the stakeholder meeting of the EPA DOE review of the Hood Canal science. And at that point, venue, I think the most important message that came through is really how much uncertainty there is still in the knowledge of Puget Sound, and how much work still needs to be done, and how much we don't know. Even there are some controversies about whether or not the human impact in Lynch Cove's area of Puget Sound is significant or not. So how is this encyclopedia capture such uncertainties and possibly controversies and disagreements among scientists? Because in some ways, as a collective community, that's probably the thing that we would most want to communicate to the managers, stakeholders, that we simply don't know some answers.
Well, and recall that the panel was chosen in part because they're coming in from outside the development of the Encyclopedia of Puget Sound, but have relevant experience. So I could make a friendly amendment to your question, which is what have you, for the panel, do you have some ideas about best practices for expressing uncertainty and in such a way that at times that can be very paralyzing, we've sort of seen?
Yeah, I think, like in Wikipedia, sometimes, for instance, articles it's kind of edited by, various fighting factions, and then it gets protected, from further editing efforts.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I think the whole credibility of the article, whether it's on which side is right, it doesn't matter, sort of deteriorates, I think. How could such a thing be avoided if this is a sort of participatory kind of exercise?
Well, it sounds like Tracy, do you have some?
Yeah, we deal with that a lot as an aggregator. We have information coming in that's side by side that often is conflicting, and we try to come up with this mandate that, science is not all wrapped up, and people have disagreements and different points of view, and let's share all of them. One way we've dealt with that is providing a mechanism of communication on our website where scientists can communicate with each other, and it's moderated. And so that's just one way of doing it for us.
Who pays the moderators?
Well, actually, sorry, when I say moderator, I meant curator. We have people on staff, and we also have a network of volunteer curators who will sort of, I wouldn't say mediate, but help out, facilitate the conversation.
And I should also add that, like a lot of the technology allows us to have, real-time conversations about debates about the science. And one of the things we want to do on the encyclopedia is, allow people to make comments and have accounts and so forth. So if that is one way to address some of that.
So Lisa, so here I think this is a really good point, and it does kind of get at the crux of science as a process, and that there'll be certain things I think we can borrow from the IPCC approach here, where this is, and the board will just be talking about this. I'm sure we just, as Joel mentioned, we had our first meeting today, but how they have a consensus statement, and then they have really clear statements of topics or issues that are not yet under consensus, and they talk about that very explicitly. And then if we combine that with these side fora where people can talk and debate, that's one really useful approach. And the other one, I don't know how many of you have seen Sea Monster or similar blogs like that. It sounds a lot like what you guys do at the Encyclopedia of Life, but where there is a moderated, very, very heated debate. It's all blogged that's been around food security in the oceans, and been a couple of interesting ones, and then they call it after a while. So they invite very heated discussion back and forth, and then the moderator, in this case it was Emmett Duffy, he pulls all the information together, posts it all, and then comments on it at the end, and then that's all public and out there for people to digest. And it's always drawing on peer-reviewed literature, but also people's latest, greatest data. So that's another good model that we can draw on. But we have to capture it somehow.
Yeah, just to follow up what you were saying, is to make it transparent, have those comments and those discussions public so that the general public can decide.
Speaking of heated debates, I'm a county commissioner from Jefferson County, which is has waters of Puget Sound ranging from Discovery Bay to and including the Hood Canal. And our county and every county that does have shoreline is tasked with writing a shoreline master plan. And this shoreline master plan must be based upon best available science. The struggle we have is between persons who lean toward wanting to protect the natural qualities of Puget Sound with persons who want to exploit it for industrial purposes, such as in-water Atlantic salmon net pens. I'd be curious to see if members of the panel believe that the encyclopedia would be seen as a source of best available science. So decision makers like myself and other county commissioners, rarely are we natural scientists. I'm a psychologist, which doesn't help. If we could look toward the encyclopedia as a source of best available science.
Is there a lawyer?
I mean, I think that's the intention,
Yeah,
really.
and Rob, I think, has a
But
comment.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm obviously external to the encyclopedia, but I have kind of a related question, which is, I'm just curious, how many of you in this room have heard of Puget Sound watershed characterization work that's being done at Washington State Department of Ecology? So, lots, that would like sort of 60% or something like that. So that would be a related piece of effort where people inside of the Department of Ecology are taking sort of a standardized chopping up the map of Puget Sound into these little watershed units, assessment units, and saying, okay, for each one we're going to give a score for water quality and water flow and habitat, and from that derive sort of, is this worth saving, is this worth restoring, protecting, or is it just too far gone, we should build more Walmarts there. And that group is now concerned with, they finished a study, how do they get that information out to decision makers, right? And if you sort of extend that to shoreline stuff too, it's the same kind of problem. So one of the things that I alluded to briefly is the idea of services as opposed to web portals. And if you can think about the ecology guys making their information available, that doesn't mean that the encyclopedia would then have to go over to their computers and ball up all that information, make a copy of it, and then make that available also. But instead what you want is sort of a transparency. We don't need to know what particular disk drive this information is coming from. You just want to be able to see into it. So that kind of confederation of different systems in turn requires a certain amount of technological backing. And so to just sort of throw yet another random idea out, if you are looking as a scientist for ways of making progress in technology, one option you have is to go into your computer science department at your university and look for idealists who want to make recruit them and have them write computer programs. And there's actually a guy who does this kind of stuff in Bill Howard, computer scientist who works in science. He has progress in the area of getting sort of crossing that bridge to make a stronger, a stronger cyber infrastructure to enable the kind of information discovery that you're talking about.
So we're going to have to bring this to a close. I want to thank the panel and thank Lisa for leading the panel, and thank all of you for coming. There's we're going to continue the discussions in the hallway. But again, thanks to the panel and thanks to all of you.